Christians. And that is the beginning of the Gospel of St. John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. All things were made through Him. This is the Gospel in Greek. The Greek word is logos, which doesn't mean just word, it means reason. So St. John is saying, in the beginning was reason, and God is reason, and all things were made through Him as reason. So you can only go so far in Christianity in trying to delegitimize reason, and you bump into this wall. Wait a minute. God is logos. God is reason. And that has served as a break within Christian thought to stop the developments of voluntarism and occasionalism from taking us down the road, this very sad road that Islam has gone. To just give you a little flavor of how literal they take the denial of causality, I'm going to use As-Sanusi again, but he's just repeating al-Ghazali from the late 10th century. You become aware of the impossibility of anything in the world producing any effect whatsoever, because that entails the removal of that effect from the power and will of our majestic and mighty protector. For that matter, food has no effect on satiety, nor water on moistening the land, nor fire on burning. Know that it is from God from the start, without the other accompanying things that have any intermediacy or effect on it, neither by their nature nor by their power, or blah, blah, blah. Whoever holds that those things produce an effect by their nature is an unbeliever. I mean, that is how explicit the denial of cause and effect is. So when you lose the narrative of cause and effect, everything becomes incomprehensible to you. I mean, can you imagine how devastating this is, how inaccessible reality becomes to you when you succumb to this? Why in Saudi Arabia and Qatar are they spending money on higher institutions of learning? Because they need engineers and doctors and physicists, and they are falling grievously behind because they don't have those, and you may know in their own countries they are opposed for doing this. Because of this crazy metaphysics and this denial of epistemology that man could come to know anything, the Beit al-Hikmah, by the way, in Baghdad was closed, and Muslim education became reduced to memorization. The fiqh memorized the law, and education became reduced to Islamic jurisprudence. What the qadis and muftis have said. Just memorize it. Education was reduced to memorization because of the loss of critical thinking. I want to just make it clear by giving this one more time in terms of the disconnection of cause and effect. And I will give you al-Ash'ari's own example. A man picks up a pen and writes. It is, however, God who creates in him the will to write, the power to write, and then the motion of the hand to the paper with the pen. Allah then also causes the figures to appear on the paper as the pen touches it. So, now these figures appeared when my pen touched it, and those of you who have committed shirk tonight will probably say it was the principle of osmosis that drew the fluid from the pen to the dry paper when I applied the pressure. Shirk, shirk, shirk. I see all of you are committing the sin of shirk. When actually my touching the pen to the paper, according to the Ash'arites, is completely unconnected with the appearance of the figures on the paper. The consequence of this denial of causality and this reduction of God to pure will and power has produced the dysfunctional world of Islam, and most particularly in the Arab world. And I spelled out last week the extent of that disaster. I can give you a couple of examples to show you how this affects life in its daily ways. For instance, I have my friends in Saudi Arabia. There's a terrible problem getting people to wear their seatbelts. Why is that? Well, the thing is, if your time has come, the seatbelt is not going to save you, and if your time hasn't come, well, then you don't need the seatbelt. Or people I know who have been training Iraqi forces, trying to get them to wear their Kevlar vests. There's a famous line in the Quran, it was not you who shot, it was I, Allah, who shot the arrow. Which makes it hard to get these people to pay attention to marksmanship. Now, you have to aim the weapon, maintain the weapon. Now, if Allah wants the bullet to hit, it will hit. Likewise, if Allah wants the bullet to hit me, the Kevlar vest isn't going to save me. And if it's not going to hit me, I don't need the Kevlar vest. I had a young Kurdish friend who went on the Hajj with a very pious friend. And they were circling the Kaaba in Mecca, and they were discussing and arguing over these very issues we're just talking about tonight. And his friend touched the famous black stone, and it was cool. And he said, look, under the hot, blazing Saudi sun, the famous black stone is cool. This is a miracle. This demonstrates God's direct action. And my Kurdish friend from a famous smuggling family in the north of Iraq was a little more skeptical. So he walked around he touched it and said, that's right, it is cool. That's very unusual. He walks around the Kaaba until he finds a set of stairs, goes down them, and at the bottom there is a refrigeration unit. So he takes his pious friend, walks him down the stairs, and says, this is why the black stone is cool. What was his friend's reaction? Outrage. Outrage. It was a direct assault on his theology. There are people in Saudi Arabia today who still refuse to believe man has been to the moon. Not because they're stupid, but because it's impermissible for man to know all the things he would have had to know to get there. Thrust weight, rotation of the earth, all of those things that you would have to know are things you cannot know. And therefore we cannot have been there. Even though there's been a Saudi astronaut. Who was puzzled because the imams were thinking, what's the direction of prayer in outer space? No, I'm serious. These are serious questions. And as you may know, in Pakistan, when General Zia al-Haq was the president, he was a fervent Islamist, the imams were complaining about the weather broadcasts on Pakistani TV, which he then had removed for a couple of years. What was the problem with the weather forecasts, according to the imams?
How would you know?
How would you know? If God directly creates the weather, and he is incalculable, because he acts for no reasons, how then can you calculate the weather? It's an active presumption.
So do they think that Ben Laden was killed because of the holiday?
Yes, they would. They would say that he was a martyr. That's. Yeah, well, just like writing of the pen, is, just to finish the little thought on the consequences of occasionalism and voluntarism, not only does any conception of justice according to nature go out the window, and you're left with just this legalism, but there's no room for free will.
I'm trying to stay with the metaphysics. When you drop the pen, it's the Allah. How do they know that Allah doesn't cause gravity?
Why can't Allah cause gravity? It's because he cannot constrict his own powers. He would not be omnipotent according to their understanding of omnipotence if anything else had any power whatsoever. And that includes human beings. I'm going to leave you, because we're going to move to Q&A here, with something a friend of mine wrote, who belonged to the most violent terrorist group in Egypt, al-Jabbar al-Islamiyah. When he was a medical student, he was recruited by this terrorist organization. He knew Zawahiri, the number 2 in Al-Qaeda, but he recovered. He's now a neighbor. He lives. It's okay, folks. He's the